So what's my experience with the nature process? Why did it call to me? Who am I that I would be sharing this particular series of steps, these particular stools? Nature process has been around for about 2.5 years maybe at the time of this video. But I started the nature process about almost 14 years ago after the death of my older son by suicide. I was doing the nature process. I wasn't planning on it or thinking about it. I was simply compelled to get out into nature. I had to get out of the house. I had to get away from people. I had to be where there was nurturing, where there was growth, where there was change, where there was movement that drew my eye in. Every time that I would head out to nature, I would follow these steps. First, my eyes would be totally attracted to something, or my breath would be leading me in a particular direction. And what I found was I would really immerse myself, settle into a particular place as if I was being called to it, as if these warm, loving arms were saying, bring it here, bring it on in. I would settle in, and I wouldn't care if there were people around. I wouldn't care what else was happening behind me or down the path. I would just be drawn into this natural place. And once I got there, I would settle in, and my mind would just start going. Whatever particular issue or grief was tugging at my heartstrings that day would just pour out of me. Sometimes I would verbalize it loudly and not very politely, and perhaps with a few, 4-letter words thrown in. Sometimes it was just this deep silence, a deep disbelief that this was even happening. And so there would always be 1 or 2 thoughts within all of that rumination and mental activity that would float to the top. Something right then that was calling for clarity or truth or understanding or release. And then I would notice my body. I would notice how it felt sitting on the ground or sitting against a tree or sitting with my feet on a rock with my feet down in the water. Whatever the environment was, it was as if I would just give my body up to it. And I would begin to notice the temperature, the time of day, activity, the birds, the movement of the leaves of the trees. I would begin to come into my physical body being in this place. And then my eye would catch something. Something would catch my eye. I would see a flicker of light or maybe a movement or an interesting or unique shape or pattern or design. Perhaps it was the vista some days or the breadth of the sky. And I would be mesmerized. I would just be so attracted to this particular thing for no good reason. Might have been a place in nature I had been to hundreds of times before, but in this moment, in this day, there was a particular natural attraction that I had. And I would begin to immerse myself into it. What is this? What is this place? And what was interesting was the metaphors that came. The metaphors about my grief, the metaphors about my son's grief, the metaphors about the healing process and what I was willing to let go of or give up in that moment. And trust me, there were many moments, many months and many years when I was not willing to give up certain thoughts, certain feelings, certain memories. But there would be the metaphor. The metaphor would be, well, what if you had these 2 plants together and one is healthy and growing beautifully. It's really green and lush, has great blossoms. And this plant, exactly the same, looks a little spindly. Looks like maybe its root system isn't so good and there's not nearly the blossoms or the fruit on it. And why would that be? And this would lead me to the metaphor of my 2 children. Why is one healthy and nurtured and doing everything he can possibly do and coming from whatever his internal goals and desires are? And why is the other one in such deep grief? And the metaphors would come that even though these two plants are planted right next to each other, everything about them is different. Their history, their background, their experience. Maybe they have the same weather, maybe they have the same environment, but within that, no, there's details. This plant may have the lawnmower clipping it every time it goes by. This plant may have a little edging of border so the lawnmower doesn't touch it. This plant may have the neighbor's dog come out and not only pee on it, but perhaps dig at the roots, and I never noticed. This plant, because of maybe some prickly things growing around the base, the dog stays away from. So even though these two plants seem so similar, they're not. And so that metaphor continues. No matter what I did as a mother to bring these plants into this warm, nurturing, healthy environment, there was only so much that I could control. There was only so much that I could know and even take care of. And what happened with that was this moment of clarity. There was this poof that I knew with my breath, this is a truth. This is a moment of clarity. And what I learned in that moment was how I was holding on to that grief, that remorse or regret that what if I wasn't the best mother? What if I didn't make all the right decisions? What if I couldn't control his life? Oh, wait, I couldn't control his life. That's a grief. Was I ready to get rid of it? And so there would be tears. There would be screaming and ranting and crying because this kernel of truth bubbled up. And I would feel it someplace in my body. Might have been in my gut, might have been right here, some truth that was just gnawing at me, that was just clenching right in my TMJ area. That tightness, that inability to express the truth, to release the truth of that particular thought, that particular metaphor. And the more that I would talk about it, the more that I would really immerse myself in the metaphors, the more I began to have this sense that the nature around me was happy with it. It could take whatever I wanted to give it, whatever words came out of my mouth. It could take my deepest grief and my most powerful anger. And what it gave me back was nothing but air and water and light and food and plants, right? That's all nature is. It's there to receive and to give back. And when I recognized that I was in a place with critters or plants or trees around me where I could experience whatever I was experiencing without anybody's judgment, without anybody pointing fingers or saying you should or you shouldn't. You should do it in this time frame or you shouldn't. When there was just nothing but me and the truth of these metaphors reflected within the truth of my own emotions, my own thoughts, there was a way to let it go. All of a sudden, that one issue, what a failure I must have been as a mother. What a failure, or what things I should have done. Oh, shoulda, woulda, coulda, right? That one issue and topic in that day, in that moment, in that place in nature was gone. I recognized that I allowed myself to get to the bubble of that truth. And there was something in nature that just said, give it to me, I can take it, I can handle it. And then what bubbled up was deep gratitude, the deepest gratitude I could ever imagine. This is what the nature process is about for me. This is what has drawn me to it. Tabitha Jane, in defining the nature process, took my steps that I did intuitively and has turned them into what for me is a no-brainer, simple, really clear way to experience that same nurturing and metaphor and release that I found for myself. I know we all have some layer of grief, regret, decision-making, even goal-making, rumination. So I hope that you'll visit thenatureprocess.co and see how these really simple processes and steps can help you also come to a place of ease and light and even joy, even in the midst of whatever grief you may have experienced.